Okay, everyone, let's just dive straight into this. So today we're going to be covering another GCSE Geography exam question. So remember, we're going to go through the assessment objectives, how to break down the question, identify the key elements behind it, understand how to structure it, and receive some guidance on what to do and what not to do when writing your answers. GCSE assessment objectives are all set by Ofqual, and they're the same across all the GCSE specification and all exam boards. And these are measured in 4 different ways. Number 1 is assessment objective 1. You have 2, 3, and 4. In summary, the first one reflects how much you can remember from your GCSE content that you've covered in class. The second one will be about understanding, how you can apply your understanding in different ways. The third one would be applying it, analyzing and evaluating pieces of information that might be given to you in the exam itself. And finally, number 4 will be about creating and adapting and using material that, again, is given to you in the exam. So remember that the assessment objective 1 questions are command words like state and describe. And assessment objective 2 will be questions such as explain, suggest, discuss, and to what extent. Assessment objective 3 questions, normally 9-mark questions on your exam, will ask to what extent questions or be assess the importance of X or Y when you're answering the question. So today we're going to look at this question here. The changing UK economy. Explain how the development of public transport is reducing traffic pressures in urbs that you have looked at. So you have to look at an urban area that you've studied yourself. So this will be a 6-mark question. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to quickly write down this question, and then we will move on to the next part. Okay. So there are key components to this. Number 1, you've got to explain. So it's got to be something that you are giving a reasoning for. It can't just be simply descriptive. You've got to talk about public transport in specific, and you've got to talk about how you can reduce traffic pressures. So how can you reduce traffic on the road and elsewhere? And it's got to be focused on an urban area, not a rural area. That's very, very important as well. So that's going to be giving you 6 marks in total at the end. Now, for a 6-mark question, at the top end, for a level 3 answer, you need to have a detailed use of examples to show how public transport can reduce traffic pressures, and you need to have specific, detailed explanation with case study examples. For a level 2 answer, you'll probably just end up just talking about how public transport has been developed and some exemplification of it. There might be some reference to a specific place, whereas a level 1 answer will typically just give you generic ideas rather than talking about why they may reduce the traffic pressures in the first place. So remember, we're always looking for the top value marks. So you've got to make sure that we use detailed examples in our answers, and we refer to specific public transport measures, how they reduce traffic pressures, but also give some relevant case studies that might be appropriate to go with it. Now, if you're revising, this is really useful for you. Write the question down, and instead of answering the question from the top of your head and getting frustrated, you can take your textbook out, you can take your notes out and try to answer this question using the materials that I've provided here for you. So look at the question again, look at this table. You can draw this table out inside your exercise book, and then write out some examples of urban areas that you studied. It could be from the textbook or from your notes, whatever area that you are from. And then write down some public transport initiatives that have taken place in those places. And then write down a brief description of how they've reduced pressures. Now, by outlining your work, doing a table in the first place will help you, because you can then focus on just revising, reviewing the notes very carefully, and condensing that piece of information before you start answering the question. And that way, you're going to feel far more confident and comfortable in answering the question rather than trying to remember the information off the top of your head. And this way, you will write a better answer afterwards. So not only do you end up writing a better answer, you've also revised, and in the long term, when it comes to the actual exam itself, you'll remember this material in a lot more detail. So just give you a quick 30 seconds to note down this table, and then we'll move on to the next section. Okay, let's move on. Now, here's an example of an introduction that a candidate has written. Let's have a look at the answer. In X, a specific place, there, they spelled there wrong, was huge amounts of traffic congestion that could cost people hours of their day. But as the country started to develop economically, more public transport has been introduced, such as trains and buses. So I'd like you to reflect on this very, very quickly yourself. Have a look at the mark scheme below. How has this hit level 1, 2, or 3? Have a think about it, and then we'll talk about this in a bit more detail. So give you guys 30 seconds. Okay, so in this answer, they haven't actually referred to any specific public transport in a lot of detail. They've talked about a train and a bus, but that's very vague examples to give for public transport. So already, if I'm looking at an answer like this, I'm thinking probably going to be a low level 1 sort of answer rather than a level 2, and definitely not a level 3 answer. Here's a continuation. This relieves traffic as less people are driving cars and more people are taking the bus and train, meaning less cars on the road. So essentially, they just repeated themselves again and again in the final sentence. But again, they haven't referred to a specific example. They haven't contextualized it with facts and figures. They haven't given a reference to a specific place. So again, I'd be thinking that this is going to be a low level 1 sort of answer, maybe 1 or 2 marks, if that. It's very limited in its explanation as well. Another example of an answer. For example, development of a tram system means that 70% of the residents live within 500 meters of a station. So already, this candidate has given an example of a public transportation system. They haven't just referred to trains and buses. They've said a tram system, and they've given some contextualization with some numbers. So 70% of residents live within 500 meters, talking about how, or alluding to the fact that this will lead to a reduction of people on the road. In addition, the reduction in public transport prices, so now talking about pricing, as well as free tickets to the tram network being installed, tickets to sporting and other events made the tram and bus network a more attractive alternative to cars for many people. So already what this candidate is doing is establishing their authority over the information that they're providing. They're saying, hey, look, this is what's happened. They've also done these additional things, not just created a tram system, they've also created free ticketing systems. And that way, they're incentivizing people to come and to use the tram rather than using private transportation. Now, obviously, if this continues onwards, it's likely that this is going to be a high-end sort of mark. So we're looking at probably a level 3 because it's giving detailed examples of a specific public transport. And I'm assuming that in prior to how this answer got to where it was, they've referred to a specific place as well. So be mindful when you're answering the question. Remember, you've just got to make your point and then develop your point and link it back to the original question. This candidate does it very well. They've given not only an example of a system, then they've given some data to validate it, and then they developed it even further. Now, going on, this development of public transport reasons has led to X more journeys being made on public transport and X on the road per year. This has reduced traffic pressure in the city of X. So they refer to a specific place. They've talked about how this has reduced pressures on the road and reduced traffic. So it's going back to the original point that they were making and then going back to the original question that's being asked and answering it. So this is really, really well written, well focused, well delivered information. So think about how you can apply or write in a similar way. My suggestion would be maybe try rewriting these answers or this template of an answer in your own words, because it's got to come from you. If you can get used to writing it in your own way, but in the structure, you will write consistently good answers all the time. Now, if we break down the different assessment objectives, 1, 2, and 3, if you're a level 1 answer, you're generally going to have some very generic ideas in place. You're going to talk about saying public transport has been improved in many areas and this is taking cars off the road. A very general sort of answer may be given. For those of you who are aiming for level 2, you'll probably develop it a little bit more. So you're demonstrating how public transport has been developed and is having an effect on traffic pressure. For example, you'll refer to many urban areas have metro systems put in place. These connect up different parts of cities, and many people use them for work, so they don't have to use cars. This can be seen in Manchester, for example. Now, this is better than the previous one. At least it contextualizes it in a place, but then it talks about many urban areas rather than focusing on a specific urban area. Remember that for a level 3, you've got to focus it in on a particular example. It can't just be a generic one. So here's an example of some examples of level 1 and level 3 answers. Level 1 answer, they develop public transport, doesn't talk about any. Introduce buses and trains, vague transportation measures. It's not really giving me much evidence that this candidate knows what they're talking about. Less cars on the road as people are taking X or Y. Again, too vague, not talking about specifics, not giving data to back up their answer. A better paragraph for a level 3 answer would be something like this. Crossrail has improved journey times across London, easing congestion and offering better connections to the underground and to the rest of the UK and Europe. It will, when fully operational, bring an additional 1.5 million people within 45 minutes of commuting distance. And then you could carry on going back to the question, answering it specifically. So the key thing is, do you refer to a specific example? You talk about how it's helping to reduce traffic pressures, and then go back to the original question and answer it very thoroughly. Remember, overall, when you're answering an explain question, a 6 marker, you're not going to likely need to do a conclusion. But if you insist on doing one, make sure that you write down specific words, such as overall, to a large extent, to a small extent. Don't ever completely agree or completely disagree with a question that you might be asked. So in this case, you might say, overall, I think that tram systems or the metro system has reduced traffic pressures by, and then you explain why, and then therefore this has resulted in X or Y. So you're going back to the original question. My suggestion would be for you to look at this question very carefully, take out your textbook, and just write a conclusion. Just write using that template, write down the line first, and then go ahead and answer it based on that. Again, it's not meant to catch you out. It's meant to encourage you to be able to write and develop your writing skills. If you're not practicing on a regular basis, you're not going to improve. You have to try to do a little bit every single week. Just a little bit every week will help you over a long period of time significantly. So keep on working on it, little bit at a time. Now, go back to the question, write down if you hadn't already, answer the question in your own time, and make sure that you follow the guidance that I've given you. You've had some examples of some level 1 answers and some level 3 answers. Maybe go back and look at how you can replicate them in your own words using your own examples. And if you practice this, you will definitely improve in your writing skills. So make sure you practice, make sure you annotate your answer before you start writing it. Another way to encourage better literacy skills would be to try to read a newspaper article. You can go on BBC Online, for example, BBC News, or other newspapers, for example, and just read some articles that interest you. It doesn't have to be specifically related to this topic. It could be related to other topics, just so that you get an idea of how people write and how they demonstrate their authority on a particular subject. Make sure that you write in third person. And the key thing to remember, regardless of whether you're doing GCSE, A-level, or you're beyond that, is you've got to write with authority. You've got to write and demonstrate to the person who's reading your writing that you really know what you're talking about. And again, you can only do that if you're practicing writing your answers neatly and clearly every single time. Next week, we'll do another Rivers question, or we might do a different question altogether, depending on what I've got in stock. So make sure by that time you've done this previous question that we've looked at today, and in that way you will continue to get better and better each time. So hopefully that's been useful for you. Remember, I have got some other videos out there as well on different GCSE topics, exam questions. If you haven't looked at those, make sure you go back and review those and look at the answers in them very, very carefully. If you're reviewing them on a regular basis, you're definitely going to improve in your own writing skills, guys, right? So make sure you come back to those, and do leave me any questions or comments if something's not been covered. If you're not sure about something, always ask, and I will make sure that I'll get on it for you for next time. Right, I'll see you again next Monday.